Hello, everybody. This is Viranshi Dunwara. I'm a third year psychology student and I've been practicing yoga since 4 months now under Sanjit Shetty, who has been teaching yoga since 10 years and has been practicing since 25 years, if I'm not wrong. So, psychology and yoga. I was introduced to yoga psychology for the very first time by him, and at first I thought, what must it be like? Yoga, when I think of, is more about the body, and psychology is more about the mind. So I thought it must be something that emphasizes on the interconnection between the two. But this is just my interpretation. I would like to know your interpretation of what exactly is yoga psychology.
So, like people have this misconception that yoga is only about the body, but the reality is that yoga is working at three levels. There is the body, the mind, as well as the spiritual aspect. There are so many different schools of yoga, and nowadays there's this whole new modern trend of following modern exercises like calisthenics and all. So a lot of people ask me sometimes, like why do you still stick to the traditional Indian system of yoga when you can actually practice all these modern different types of exercise that you get to see on Instagram also. The reason I stick to traditional Indian yoga is because it is not just good for the body; it's good for the mind also, and it's because it's working on the glands of the human body. So, like the yoga asanas that we do, it creates a pressurizing and depressurizing effect on the different glands of the body. And apart from that, there is something known as time perception. So the traditional yoga, the asanas and all, it actually affects time perception also, which is good for the mind. Once you talk about glands and time perception, that will include the mind as well as the spirit or the observer principle, the conscience. So there is this concept in yoga also, like speech skills. Speaking skills, for example, people have a fear of public speaking. In general, people have a fear of public speaking, and it has got something to do with your solar plexus. So basically, if your solar plexus is weak, so then you'll have a problem speaking in public. You'll have a fear of public speaking. So the solution for that is, this is just one of the examples of how yoga is connected to psychology. So if you practice something like mayurasana, the peacock pose, it stimulates the solar plexus and it actually improves your speech skills. So you can see how practicing asanas, it it improves psychological aspects of your existence, like for example speaking in public and not having that fear of public speaking. That is also connected to yoga.
That was a really good explanation with a really good example that you put forward, public speaking. I'm sure a lot of us dread speaking in the public, especially if we are given a mic to speak and we're like, what are we going to say now? But yes, so this, it's not just psychological, but
Yes,
it's
it is
also
also physical.
the
Yes, exactly.
body's
So basically,
ability
what are
to
you gonna say
speak.
now? Now that is related to the content. So like if your content is not clear, if you're not clear about what message you want to convey, then you'll have a problem speaking in public. But secondly, there's also an energy aspect to it, and that is connected to the plexi and the glands of the body. So if the so like metaphorically they say the Manipur chakra is weak. If you're not able to speak properly in public, if you don't have a good public speaking skills, it's because your Manipur chakra is weak, which basically means your solar plexus is really weak. So you can strengthen that by doing asanas like Mayurasana. So this is just one small example of how it works. There are different other examples also, but
I
this is
am
one of the
looking
aspects.
forward to strengthen my Manipur chakra right now. Oh, I have heard many people don't like Mayurasana because of the
Because
opiate
of
depression.
the challenging nature of the posture, and it's like it puts a lot of pressure on the stomach, on the Manipur chakra basically. So yeah, you're basically allowing the elbows to press near the navel region, so that stimulates
Okay.
the solar plexus. It stimulates all the digestive organs and the glands located in that region. So when you do Mayurasana, you're actually improving your speech skills. Like in terms of
Not just physically, but also psychologically.
yeah, psychologically also. Even if you have the content ready in your mind, but when you're facing a public, you'll be afraid, right? You'll be afraid of
Yeah.
fumbling. You'll or the words are not coming out smoothly, not coming out clearly. So that is something to do with not just your mind, but also something to do with that internal energy, the way you breathe, the way you speak. It's all connected to that.
Wow, there are so many details and
Yeah,
intricacies I
the
never
way
even
you breathe
thought
also
about.
matters. Like even it matters when you sing. So like they say, you should breathe with the stomach so that you're able to sing properly. Abdominal breathing. That's why in my yoga classes also, I talk a lot about abdominal breathing, because not only does it affect your health and your respiration, but it also affects your voice, affects the way you speak, the loudness of your voice and the clarity of your voice, and it will help with singing also. It's good for singing also.
So, moving forward from mind, body, then speaking, public speaking. So, we have learned quite a few things in the podcast till now: mind body connection, Manipur chakra, and public speaking. So, how doing certain asanas can help you not just relieve your anxiety, the fear as in the anxiety while speaking in public, but also it helps in singing, how breathing helps in singing, and how different details that we don't even talk about much are playing a major role in us presenting ourselves to others. Speaking, communication, which is a very important thing, and it's not very much emphasized upon through exercising. So, exercising, people look at exercising and yoga as a form of fitness, but they don't look at other aspects of it which help us in our day to day lives. Thank you for sharing that. And another question I wanted to ask was yoga psychology. How is it different from the current schools of psychology, like school of have you heard about Sigmund Freud
Yeah.
and his theory of psychodynamics? So, would you like to differentiate between the two?
Well, so I won't really just talk about the limitation of Western psychology. I'm talking about limitation of psychology in general also, like even Eastern psychology. So what happens in psychology, like in general psychology, Western as well as Eastern, you're basically using the mind to understand the mind. So basically, you're coming up with concepts. You're basically using your intellect to divide the mind into different terms. You're coming up with terms, and you're dividing the mind and labeling it with those terms. So what you're doing is you're basically making up things in your mind, and you're trying to define the mind using the mind, which is always going to be a little bit limited. You're not really understanding the mind in terms of existence. You're not really understanding it in terms of the fabric of space. So you're not really looking at the existential reality of the mind. You're creating concepts in your mind, and you're trying to define the mind based on those concepts. Categorizing the mind into different categories, and those categories are again just like, for example, I'll talk about Eastern psychology also, where they talk about man, buddhi, ahankar, chit, so dividing the mind in general. So I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything. It's just that it is a bit limited in the sense that these are just words. You've divided the mind into words, and yeah, I mean, if you can understand the meaning of those words, then that's good. But still, it's like a mental division. It's a psychic division. You've created a psychic division. You've created psychic concepts, psychic words, which are basically dividing the mind. But the better approach would be to actually understand conscience and the mind in terms of the fabric of space itself. That is where again yoga psychology comes into the picture. You're basically, when you go deeper into yoga psychology, there is something known as the principle of sentience, which in Sanskrit it's called sattva or sattvic. You must have heard of the word sattvic or sattva. So there is nothing but the principle of sentience. So what does that mean? It basically the basic understanding is that the universe was created by the Big Bang. So obviously, I and you are also created by the Big Bang. That means the ingredients for the creation of mind, or the ingredients for the creation of not just human mind and human conscience, but animal mind and animal conscience, all the animate objects, the ingredients of that was already there in the fabric of space. It's deeply embedded in the fabric of space. You can call it the aspect of conscience, or the principle of sentience was already there and deeply embedded in the fabric of space. So when the Big Bang happened, it already had the ingredients for the creation of human mind. So when you understand that principle of sentience, so that is like, you are basically using, or you're looking at the human mind through the subject of yoga psychology, not just general psychology. You're actually trying to understand it in terms of the fabric of space. And there is, again, there's a lot more to it than just this. But yeah, this is just like the basic understanding, that why do we need yoga psychology. It's because we are understanding it not just in terms of our own mind, but we are also understanding it in terms of reality, in terms of existence.
So, even if I try to understand the principle of sentience right now, I'll get a very surface level of understanding. For me to understand it, um, like you do, it will take years of experience, I'm sure, to
Well, to be honest, like
grasp
even I
the
don't understand
understanding
it
that
completely.
we have originated from the very first Big Bang. So, consciousness, are you trying to say that the consciousness has stayed since there and it's
It
still
has,
going?
yes. What I'm saying, trying to say is that the consciousness obviously has its basis in the Big Bang. It has its basis in the fabric of space. It's just that it is too complex. The science is too complex for us to understand it. Well, I can, like, someone has already propounded the theory. It's called the theory of microvita, but it's a complex scientific theory, something that I'm not really psychologically ready to talk about, like, or elaborate about. But yeah, so basically that's what it is. That is like that one of the aspects of yoga psychology, apart from uh, the the thing that I mentioned about the glands and about time perception. So that is also there. Time perception is there, the glands are there, and the gland which is related to time perception, which is the pineal gland. So yoga, the actual system of yoga, is also connected to the pineal gland and time perception. So that way also, we are actually looking at the existential reality of the mind, and not just some mental concepts that someone came up with, and then they divided it using those concepts. They divided the mind. No, we're not just limiting ourselves to that, which is what generally psychology is. But we are also going a little bit beyond that. We are actually looking at what exactly it is in terms of reality. So yeah.
Okay, so speaking about existential perspective to psychology, and speaking about time perception, glands, the Big Bang, how will that help the individual to grow as a being?
So, like I said, there are different schools of yoga, there are different philosophies, and then there are different psychological schools also. Like, there are a lot of psychologists, and you must have seen what is happening now currently in modern, during, like, this is the modern age, and instead of solving psychological problems, you must have noticed that newer mental ailments are coming into the picture nowadays. More complex or subtler the intellect starts getting, more complex the mental ailments start getting. It's because you're not really looking at the root cause of the problem. So, like, in even in yoga, and not just philosophy or psychology, but even in yoga, if you see, there are a lot of people who uh, try to sell a brand of yoga where you're directly working on your pituitary gland. You're just directly trying to stimulate the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland, which is the organ and gland which is present between the eyebrows. So they're thinking that that's the master gland, so we should just directly focus on that. So these are like very limited and wrong wrong ways of doing yoga, where you're only stimulating one gland thinking that it will help you with everything, the mind, body, as well as the soul. So that is what is going on currently. If you see, I mean, if you just look around, go through the different schools of yoga, you'll see that there'll always be something missing. They are never covering everything. And they are always focusing on chakras or some points in the body, and they're thinking that if they just work on that, if they just work on one gland or one point, it will develop the whole human form, which is completely wrong.
How will this existential perspective, like considering the entire universe to be a part of our consciousness, is that yoga psychology about? Is that what yoga psychology is about?
Well, that is like one aspect of it, like when you are basically
One
understanding.
aspect.
Yeah, one
Okay.
aspect of it, because you're
So,
basically understanding that, because most of the sciences, if you see, most of the scientists also, like different studies, basically all the logies, the different logies, if you see, not just psychology, they are basically created by scientists, and scientists are mostly, like most of them are agnostic and atheistic. So the reason why a lot of the scientific aspects of yoga have always remained, shrouded in mystery, or they've always come under the tag of mysticism or spirituality, and not really coming under science, because it is very hard for a lot of the scientists to accept the entitative existence of conscience. Like in general, science accepts the existence of matter, it accepts the existence of energy, but this whole idea that there is an observer principle observing the matter and observing the energy, even though one may argue that this observer principle is a result of that energy and that matter that we came afterwards. So that is the whole argument behind the atheistic and agnostic approach, that you are actually saying that the matter and the energy created the human being and the human mind, and not vice versa. This is the
okay.
agnostic or atheistic approach. But the yogic approach is saying that, yeah, true, that we came after the Big Bang. That means all the energy and the matter was created first. And then, as it got refined, as the physical evolution happened, and as the chemical evolution happened, and then as the biological evolution happened, which together took billions of years. So it's like saying that this mind, this conscience has come after such a long time. So that is the argument. So how can you say that conscience is present in the fabric of space, or conscience is present, or the ingredients or aspects of consciousness is present in the Big Bang? How can you say that? Because didn't we come afterwards? And we came afterwards, like how? Like after billions of years, right? Like long time. So basically that's where time, the concept of time becomes very important. So when we say billions of years, it's basically our perception of time for us, because we are so small. We human beings are extremely small entities in the vast cosmos. So for us, it's billions of years, but for the universe, when the Big Bang happened, it's like poof, like this, and it might not, for the entire like the scale of the universe is such that for the universe itself, time, those billions of years were nothing. For us it's like a huge thing, because we are extremely tiny. So if you understand the scale of things, if you understand that time is also space time, it's not just time but space time, and because in this space we are extremely tiny, so billions of years is a huge deal for us, but for the universe it's not a huge deal. So in that
Yeah.
sense, when you think about it, then the yogic approach is also correct, because it's saying that the ingredients or the potential for the creation of human mind or human conscience was already there, deeply embedded. And like that is where time perception is also a very important concept, the pineal gland and the time perception. And
Okay. So,
it is again related to yoga, because when we practice yoga, it actually changes time perception, and that is why it is good for the mind. People often say that traditional yoga is better than other forms of yoga, purely because of the mind aspect of it, and that mind aspect of it is connected to time perception. It improves your time perception. So basically, when I say it's been one day or 24 hours, we basically understand that those 24 hours are nothing but the earth. rotating about its axis once.
Mm-hmm.
When we psychically measure that motivity or that movement, we call it 24 hours. Otherwise, 24 hours doesn't exist. What exists is the rotation of the earth. Similarly, when the earth revolves around the sun once, we call it
Mm-hmm.
365 days or 1 year. But otherwise, there is no such thing as 365 days or 1 year. It's just that we are measuring that movement in our mind, and we are labeling it, calling it 365 days or 1 year. It's actually just the movement of the earth around the sun once. When it completes that movement once, we are calling it 1 year. So, and because we are so tiny compared to the earth, also, not just the universe, so for us, that's a big deal. 1 year is a big deal, or billions of years is a big deal. But otherwise, indeed, the ingredients of conscience, or the aspect of consciousness, or the principle of sentience, some principle of sentience was already there in the Big Bang or the pre-Big Bang entity, which created us. So that is the perspective of yoga. That is the yogic perspective. But the conventional science perspective is very atheistic and agnostic, and that kind of creates a limitation in further understanding the universe and further understanding this conscience, and that too in a very rational and scientific way. It becomes more difficult because most of the scientists are atheistic and agnostic, and they don't really look at it in this manner. They're not really looking at human mind or psychology through yoga, through the lens of yoga. We are still uh, very much dependent on conventional ways or conventional study of the mind, which is general psychology. And I'm not just criticizing or talking about the limitations of Western psychology. I would also say that it is there in Eastern psychology also. This limitation is there in Eastern psychology also, because nobody has, even in Eastern psychology, nobody has actually explored it this much. This all this that I'm talking about is a part of tantric philosophy, and which is which is quite a modern thing actually.
All right, so there was a lot to absorb.
Okay.
And in brief, I want to understand what is the difference between the perspective of the scientist that you mentioned about, agnostic perspective,
That
and
matter and energy created conscience, and not the
uh,
other way around.
energy created
Matter and
consciousness
energy
and
was created in the Big Bang, like in the Big Bang,
okay, yeah, yeah. Energy created
and that
consciousness,
matter and
and the
energy
yogic
is how.
perspective,
It is not
consciousness
wrong.
created
Like,
energy.
that perspective is not wrong. It's just that it is looking at it in a different way. Like, both the perspectives are right actually. The yogic perspective, it's just that to find that sweet intersection point where science and spirituality can meet, that is what we are actually trying to do through yoga psychology. So yoga psychology is like that sweet intersection point, and that is where the scientific theory of microbiota also comes into the picture. That is like the sweet intersection point where spirituality meets science, where all the subjects of science, the physics, chemistry, and biology, where all these three subjects meet at a sweet intersection point along with spirituality. So that is what microbiota theory really is. So it will take some time for people to actually understand this and to reach a proper concrete conclusion regarding this. But yeah, it will happen eventually. That is how yoga psychology and yoga therapy will also gain a lot of popularity in the future.